Hey everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into the brand new painting tutorial and we're going to paint a British Commander step by step. So let's enjoy the painting tutorial. Before I even start applying the base coat, I did one very important thing. I took a brush and lightly dry brushed the whole miniature with a sky gray. Thanks to this step, all the shadows in the depth recesses stay nicely dark, while the edges and the detail pop out. By the way, this technique is called zenithal. It gives the model the whole new dimension. It provides the surface and make working with the upcoming layer so much easier. And for the second dry brush step, I went with the white gray. I used the lighter tone very little, focus only on the highest point and the sharpest edges. And now it's finally time for our first actual base coat. As you can see, I went with English uniform for the trousers. Since we already did the pre-shading underwear, this color is going to catch the tone and look natural shade right away. Now let's move on the first highlights on the uniform. First step, I mix together English uniform and green brown in 1:1 ratio. Before I pat brush to the model, I always make sure the paint is thinned down just enough, not too water but smoothly, so this doesn't leave ugly brush stroke. Then I carefully load the brush, wipe most of it off a paper towel and start applying it to the races area and the upper folds of the jacket. Because we did the double dry brush underneath, you can already see what the lighter natural hit the miniature. I'm just following this wheels, painting over the promised spots while leaving the dark English uniform visible in the recesses and deepest shadow. This creates a real smooth transition and start building up that volume and contrast we are looking for. And for the second highlights, I went in straight with the green brown, no more mixing, just pure green brown right out of the bottle. At this stage, we are getting closer to the final look of the uniform, so I'm being much more selective with where I place the paint. I'm only touching the absolute highest point, the sharp edges and the most promised folds where the light would not hit the hardest. Now let's switch to the gear a bit and paint some of the equipment. For the commando cap, the backpack and the water content, I decided to use Speedpaints, especially algae green. I also apply this speed paint on the belt and on the pouches. Because this is a speed paint, it behaves a little different than the standard acrylic. It acts sort of like shades and a contrast paint all in one. I make sure to apply a generously even coat, letting it flow naturally into all the recesses and the detail of the canvas straps, the texture of the backpack and the folds of the cap. Since we already did the dry brush underneath, the speed paint will naturally thin their highlights while setting dark into the crease. You just have to be careful not to let it pull too much in the flat area unless you want there's excellent water stains. Next up, we need to pick some of the smallest detail like the ropes, the webbing. For this I went with a palette bone. This is a fantastic chemical that creates a brilliant contrast against the dark uniform and a green equipment. Because the strap and the rope have a lot of texture, I make sure my brush is nice and sharp and I apply paint carefully along the races lines. Now let's bring the commander to life by painting the skin. For the face and the exposed hands, I'm using Barbarian Flesh from the Army Painter. This is a really nice ruby flesh tone that works perfectly for a soldier in the field because There's area are quite small and require a lot of patience. I'm using my smallest, sharper detail brush. I'm very careful applying the paint to the cheek, nose, chin and the detail of the hands, trying to my best not to get any on the surface, uniform or adjustment. Alright, time to add some life to the face and hands. For the first highlights on the skin, I went with the barbarian flesh and opal skin in a ratio 1:1. Now I'm using a very fine tip detail brush. I'm carefully applying this new color to the highest point of the barbarian flesh we pat down early. I'm focusing especially on the bridges of the nose, cheekbone, the chin, the forehead and the knuckle on his hands. And finally, for very last highlights on the face and hands, I'm using pure opal skin. This is Bringer's tone we apply, so we need to be extremely precision and supple with it. I'm using my absolutely best brush and making sure there's very little paint on the tip. I'm only touching the highest point, just the very tip of the nose, the sharpest point of the chin, the absolute center of the forehead and the tines dots of the knuckle. Now that the uniform management and the skin are done, it's time to move on the weapon. As the base coat for MG and the metal part, I went with the dark grey. With the base coat of dark grey lock-in, it's time to start bringing out the shapes of the weapon. For the first highlights on the rifle, I mix sky grey and dark grey in 1:1 ratio. To tie all the different color and layer together and add the final bit of a grim and the shadows, it's time to wash. For this I went with the dark tone wash from Army Painter. Now let's focus on a special shading the weapon to make all the mechanic parts of the bar and the receiver real pop. For this part I use military shade. I also apply this on the adjustment as you can see on the screen to finish up the skin and give the face and hands some perfect depth and definition. It's time to special wash. For this I went with a strong skin shade from Army Painter. And there you have it, folks. Our British Commander is full painted, shaded and ready to hit the tabletop. I really hope you enjoy following along this full painting tutorial and that it's helpful. You got your oven miniatures ready to action. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and like button. And let me know in the comment what you're gonna see next. Goodbye.